and you are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July 12th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Present.
Present.
Here. Present.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's morning meeting will begin with a public session where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. That will be followed by 4 different topics of discussion. We'll have a discussion about the intersection design at Second House Road, Shore Road, community housing November referendum, proposed language and abstract, community housing voter information, and Montauk transfer of development rights study grant application. That'll be followed by liaison reports, and we do have a few resolutions to offer. Jason, is there anyone on the line who wishes to address the board?
One moment.
Town Board, this is Jason Nauer, and I am testing out the phone line right now. There is no other callers, but the phone lines are up and operational.
Okay. It's now 11:02. Maybe we'll just wait a minute. We also, Jason, do you have Mr. Peterman in the waiting room?
Yes, I do, and he's joining right now. Oh, and we have one caller on the line who just hopped right in.
Okay, let's go to the caller.
Okay. Hello, caller ending 6147. You are on the air.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Members of the board, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you please identify yourself for the record.
Sure. This is JB DeSantos.
Morning, JB.
Good morning, everyone. I'm calling in reference to an agenda item. Good morning. An agenda item in reference to West Drive. I see here that the town board has in its agenda for the highway department to take care and cut trees on West Drive.
You're referring to a resolution that we have to offer today?
I think it's neighborhood.
That is correct.
I think it's neighborhood
Drive.
Neighborhood Drive,
But,
not West Drive.
But let me make sure.
Yeah.
It's Neighborhood House Drive.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be for Neighborhood House Drive.
2022-902.
Yes, correct.
Which end of neighborhood house? Can you please clarify which end of neighborhood house drive that refers to?
I'm not certain, but I think it's would be the northeasterly portion.
Yeah, this came in as school buses had reported that the tree limbs were scratching.
Senior buses.
Sorry?
Senior
Senior.
transportation.
Senior transportation bus had notified us that the tree branch limbs are scratching the bus as it went by.
So when this is the case, JB, we authorize the clearing of brush when it obstructs the right of way. And that's not just for buses or trucks, but it would be for emergency services, ambulances, and fire trucks as well. So we need a clear pathway along those right of ways. So in this case, I believe the recommendation from the highway superintendent is to cut back some of the brush that's growing into the roadway.
Okay, and this, to be clear, it is the portion that exits and comes in through 3 Mile Harbor Drive, where we have the neighborhood community house, correct?
I don't know, honestly, which end it refers to. It would be anywhere along that roadway where there's an obstruction.
Yes, because the West Drive portion of that road, no one has right of way over that other than Cecil Blow. So that is closed off. There are posts and a chain across, so no one has driven there for the last 10, 12 years. And but when we learned of this morning, Cecil Blow is away and other neighbors are away as well, so they could not take part in this meeting. But I just want to make sure that this is the portion that refers to the end by 3 Mile Harbor Drive, because again, that's not a road, it's not a drive-through, and the residents just do not want that opened.
Yeah, I don't believe this would be opening the roadway. It would just be improving the width of the roadway to allow vehicles to, have ingress and egress without brushing up against vegetation.
No, okay. Yeah. We're going to keep an eye on what's going on there, and I'm going to tell all the other neighbors because again, it's not a drive-through neighborhood, and the title search shows that only Cecil Blow has the right to access his home through West Drive and not Neighborhood House Drive. I just want the board to be aware of that and everyone else involved.
Yeah, thanks for calling, JB.
Okay, thank you. Take care, everyone.
You too. Jason, do we have any other callers on the line?
We have no other callers on the line.
Okay, at this point, we'll move on from public portion. We have intersection design discussion at the intersection of Second House and Shore Road. And I believe we have Mr. Peterman with us.
Yes, how you doing all? Thank you for the invite.
Very good. David, did you want to do an introduction?
Yes, please. Is Matt joining us today?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, I didn't see you online. Okay, thank you so very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. This is a discussion that's going to be centering around a proposed conceptual plan for traffic calming and also public safety in the area of Second House Road, Industrial Road, North Shore Road, and Midland Road in Montauk. If we can go to the as-is plan first. The nexus to this project right now is that we are going to be working with PSE&G, who we have an agreement with to pay a certain amount of funding for this project to be able to alleviate some of the habitual historical flooding and traffic issues in the area. As we know, PSE&G has installed a new substation in this area. There's also a new battery plant in this area, and they had to run wiring down North Shore Road recently. And what we're looking to do right now is to do an engineered design that actually will alleviate traffic safety concerns. As you notice up on the screen right now, the street right now has 5 different spurs that comes into it with about 6 different stop signs and ways. And if anyone really would like to have a good giggle, go out there and sit there for 30 minutes and try to see how the traffic flows through there, because it's really not it's not really designed too well. Maybe giggle is the wrong word to use, but it's not actually it's not something that has good safety effect to it. Recently, we employed LK McLean to go give us conceptual plans and renderings, look at the traffic flow and also drainage issues, along with the historical data that we have available, and also with the new construction plans that PSEG has in the ground as far as their trenching, to come up with a conceptual plan for design. Most recently, I met with 2 of the largest affected neighbors, one owning the Jim Grimes landscaping firm and another one owning a refuse removal firm that is down North Shore Road, to try to get some of their input about the design. And also last night, we discussed the conceptual design at the Montauk CAC. Again, this is a project to increase sightlines and increase visibility right now. I will let Jim move this forward right now, and I'll give some of the comments that I heard from those other organizations and individuals after Jim has the comments, and he'll take us through the conceptual plans, the reasons why, and how that will alleviate some of the traffic safety issues that we have in that area.
Okay.
Welcome, Jim.
All right, thank you all. Yes, we were introduced to this project, mainly as a take care of the flooding issue. Shortly after we looked into it, we noticed the traffic operational problems that Dave had mentioned. We've met with PSE&G. They made it very clear that they have some extensive high voltage underground facilities there that we have to work around. We also know Fort Pond has some ecological issues that we'll try to resolve with this project. Right now, I don't know if you could turn the screen over to me, or I could share my screen.
We see the screen share now of the layout of the proposed roundabout.
Right. I wanted to go to, well, I could explain the existing conditions now. If you could see the stationing from like 600 to, let's say, the traffic circle, the proposed traffic circle on the south side.
Zoom in on this traffic circle, Nick, if we can. One moment, Jim. We're just going to zoom in on the area.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Right.
That's a good shot. Now, typically, even after a light rain, the whole south side of the road right now becomes a lake, a silt-laden lake, which is very problematic for highway crews, especially in the winter. When we have the thawing during the day and the freezing at night, as these vehicles go through these puddles, they drag waters onto industrial and second house, and it freezes. And Steve Lynch's crews are constantly out here doing a salting operation, even though it's not snowing out or anything. So this was a primary concern for him as far as trying to save some money. We also have issues with people on second house and industrial, doing a good amount of speed, trying to negotiate this curve. There was a lot of runoffs. People are running right over that grass island, which was turning into a roundabout. So basically, the roadway right now for about 500 feet east of this proposed circle is almost dead flat. So when we have any kind of significant rainfall, that turns into a lake. So at the location of the roundabout, we're raising the road about 6 inches and then having a 0.33% upgrade towards the railroad tracks to get a downward flow towards the proposed roundabout. And we're going to pick that up in catch basins, pipe it into a proposed wetland area that we're putting on the corner of Midland and Second House. We haven't submitted for the DEC permit yet. We wanted to get the town board's input and the CAC's input before we did so. I'd rather submit one set of plans to DEC rather than continually send them some upgrades. We did, however, have a conference call with DEC on this proposal. At the intersection of North Shore and Midland, we're widening the pavement there to allow for a WB50 tractor trailer to navigate this circle. So we had to widen the road there, which actually infringed on a freshwater wetland. We considered it a man-made wetland, but the EC basically said that that's about 400 square feet. They use a 3-to-1 ratio, so the area that we show in that light blue, aqua blue that you see on the screen at Midland and Second House, that is the proposed wetland creation area, 3 times the size of what we're taking. They always go for a 3-to-1. So that'll be almost like a rain garden, a very shallow area where we can settle out some of the sediments, have some wetland plantings in there, and it'll have an overflow into Fort Pond, into a gabion weir, further filter out any of the silts that might make its way in. We are introducing scuppers into the catch basins here. They're called snouts. It removes additional silts and any kind of garbage or floatables. The traffic circle itself will tend to slow down people heading south on Industrial, because when you approach a roundabout, the people in the roundabout have the right of way. So anyone heading southbound on Industrial or westbound on Second House, that's about 90% of the traffic movement through this area. They'll have to slow down and give right away to anyone that is in the circle. So that would tend to slow the traffic in this area, through this intersection right now. We use the WB50 as a turning template guide for this.
Can you just explain? So the WB50 it's a semi-trailer, 53 feet long, and we use that for turning radiuses.
Right. Now, the red brick area surrounding the green area in the roundabout is called like a double track. The rear end of a larger tractor trailer, the back wheels will ride over that pad. Typically, the biggest trucks you'll see are WB67s. Those are usually interstate tractor trailers where the box on the back is much bigger. Typically, we don't see them coming into Long Island, and if you do, they would probably end up somewhere off the expressway through an exchange to a smaller, like a WB50. As far as the lane widths, the approaches, we're going to limit to 10-foot lane widths and use the excess pavement for shoulders. As you're familiar with the intersection, you'll the railing that does surround Fort Pond right now is let's say there's a silt pile there right now that emanates from the spillover from these puddles and the silt-laden puddles. The pile of silt debris underneath the guide rail is almost as high as the guide rail. So this project will eliminate this silt-laden runoff from directly entering Fort Pond, from a section of Industrial, Second House, North Shore, Midland. It will be put through a system to try to mitigate any of the spoilage that is now entering Fort Pond. Typically, like in the Fort Pond, in the area that you see right now, you see those phragmites emanating from the shoreline. Phragmites typically grow in 2 feet depth or less. So as over many years, this direct overland flow into Fort Pond from this area, has deposited silts and enabled this phragmite explosion over there, you might say. We looked into trying to incorporate some of this phragmite removal as part of this project, but it became outside the scope of that. As my past experience in removing phragmites, you almost have to go down 6 feet to make sure you get every piece of root. If you only do the 2-foot removal and you leave a root, it'll grow back. So it's a very costly thing, and it was really outside the scope of this whole project that basically PSE&G is paying for. I might have mentioned that, I think Dave might have mentioned also that the reason PSE&G has agreed to pay for this, before they put their substation in there, the area was much lower than the roadway. Being an electric substation, they had to get above a certain elevation to make sure they were okay in case of any super large storms. So that area was filled in about 4 to 5 feet in elevation. So any stormwaters that has deposited in there in the past no longer do, which exacerbated the flooding on Second House Road.
So Jim, if you mind me just sort of picking it up from here, talking about a little bit of the history of the area here. The history of this area is one of the only industrial areas in Montauk. There were former mines in there decades ago then too. This plan right now is to primarily address public safety issues with cars, but there's also an environmental criteria to it. Unfortunately, with the very high water table there, you can't fit subterranean catch basins in there. So that's why we're looking to do man-made wetlands and then pipe it out and then try to make sure that any water that is filtered out So any water that is moved out or daylighted out is filtered out then too. As in this design here, anything in the red, it's stamped on the ground, which will allow for snow plowing. So you're not going to be snow plowing around curves. So that has been brought by and discussed with Steve Lynch. I've discussed this also with Chief Sarlo. Chief Sarlo says almost any improvement down there for safety is going to increase public safety and transportation. One thing we're going to look at right now is on the inside curve there. The initial conceptual plans had two things. One was there's still a corrugated metal guide rail there. We're going to look to see if we can go to a wood one, right, Jim? I forget the type of terminology. I know we're looking at those and other locations in the town of East Hampton for the section we'll be removing. And also see if we can get some type of added width potentially that will allow for a walking or a bike lane, give a little bit of an added separation there then too. As far as the Phragmites did have a 15-year permit. They were, I've been told, historically being just cut and removed by other civic organizations when the pond froze. That could be something we can look in later on. If not, we can try to continue to boom mow it down to increase the visibility in that area. But with this filtering of this water here, the Phragmites stand might actually decrease with the way that we're filtering the water. I did discuss this with the Montauk CAC last night, and there was very, very positive responses from them as far as the design of the roundabout. There was one concern about just the turning lane from the Navy Road area onto North Shore Road area, but that could be addressed through the markings on there. But overall, it was a very positive result. This here would be, in the town of East Hampton, the first roundabout. I know we have the one over in the village, but this will be the first town roundabout. Roundabouts are looked at in multiple locations in the Hamlet study to be looked at, and other locations I know we've been looking at them potentially down on Long Lane and Stephen Hand's Path. So overall, the responses there, surprisingly to me, were the vast majority positive. Again, this is a conceptual plan right now. Again, with all these changes in an area that people are so used to, we want to make sure the board was understanding what we're going to do. And if the board has any questions of Jim and how we can either better this plan or questions, please let him know. And we can then try to move this forward to the DEC for permitting then too.
Board members have any questions or comments?
No, I just think this is a very good project for this area, David. Not only is it great to see the roundabout for traffic calming, but also all of the drainage that you have put into this plan, because, you know, Fort Pond, as we all know, is really impacted by all of this runoff and the elevation alone. When you're up at the railroad tracks, everything flows down into the pond. So any help we can give that pond is critical for helping to improve it with all the other work that's going on. So I think knowing this area, you were on the board, zoning board, I believe, when the battery storage.
Yeah, Terry Berger was. She brought that up also.
Came in front of us, and the neighbors had spoken of, and Jim Grimes was one of them that spoke to us at that time of all the flooding that they experience perpetually. So that part of this, where you're looking to limit that, is really excellent as well.
So I want to echo from being a liaison to Montauk CAC for many years. This was an area where, I mean, it gets down to 32 and it's a sheet of ice if there's ever any water, and it's really dangerous. So I'm really happy to see that this is finally being a project to get done. I know in talking with Steve Lynch, there's just no place to put drainage. So the water table is so high in this area. So that's why this needed to be elevated. I do want to understand what the gravel is about and what's going to happen with all of this gravel area, and why that is suggested in these locations.
Well, that's what's basically there now. Adding more like pavement will only increase the watershed itself. The actual surface of the gravel, that still can be changed, and maybe we could put some permeable asphalt in there or a different kind of medium. But the intent was not to add more impervious area.
if you look at what's there now, there's some parking that's taking place on this gravel. Is that going to continue?
I don't think there's any existing parking regulations not to do it.
Okay.
Keep in mind that like 90% or maybe even higher stay on industrial second house. There's pretty limited traffic that's on second house east of the circle or North Shore Road or Midland. Midland has a few residences on it. So most of the traffic, if you're coming south on industrial, now you're going to have to go around the circle. But I don't know of any suggestions or plans to, limit or impact the business there on the north side.
Okay. It seems as though there's a section where you're adding gravel where there's
existing gravel there now.
Yeah. Well, the vegetation that's here, they're adding gravel here. And I'm concerned that that'll just turn into more parking.
I don't intend to put any gravel, remove any of that brush that's outside the actual pavement.
All right, thank you.
I would just like to add that, as the other members have spoken about the flooding issues there, anybody who's been on this board for any period of time has received photographs and testimonials as to the amount of flooding. It has gotten so bad at times that vehicles couldn't even pass through there, especially if they were in small cars. I think I remember seeing video and photographs from someone who had a Prius, and there was at least 24 inches of rainwater standing in that section. They literally couldn't get through. We've also had times where we had heavy rains and then got about an inch of ice on top of that deep standing water and make the road very impassable. And the intersection is rather confusing for those who are unfamiliar with it. So the safety improvements are also welcome. So I know this is something that has been a chronic problem in terms of the flooding, and obviously want to keep the stormwater out of Fort Pond to the greatest degree possible. But whatever goes in, we want to make sure we're filtering out the sediments. And I support this plan. I think this is something that Montauk has long wanted to have happen, and also pleased that PSEG has worked with us to make this happen.
I just want to say I support the project as well. And I remember being out at Montauk CAC meetings, and one of the other concerns were raised, but were the speed at which some of the larger vehicles were going through that area. So it'll bring us some traffic calming too, which will be, I think, well received there by the residents.
Also, one of the other, I didn't mention, there's actually a bus depot down on North Shore Road. So the buses, the size of the buses also would be encapsulated within the turning radius study that they have done also then too. What I think we'll do now, Jim and Matt, myself, and our planning department will get together again after this with these comments that we've received from the board and then also from the community. We'll get some final plans. We'll outreach again to the stakeholders, to the board. And we'll see if this might be a project maybe we can get done by next year, by next summertime, knowing that in talking to the business owners already, they understand that any improvement's an improvement there, and there will be delays with the construction, but they're okay with that because they've already dealt with that with PSNG recently, and we'll continue to outreach with PSNG to answer some of these questions then too. So the board, thank you very much. I'll bring back more, and to the public, thank you. If you have any questions, please contact my office. And Jim and Matt, thank you for joining me today.
Dave,
I hope this also, my last comment, I hope this is the first of other roundabouts in the town of East Hampton, because I think it is actually a traffic design that is well warranted for us to have out here, particularly on our roads that are only getting a little bit busier.
Dave, I just want to say, I think I could say that the overall is a positive approval there. So I'm going to send this in for the DEC permit.
Sure. Let's talk either later today or just first thing tomorrow, and
okay,
we'll just have our exit meeting after this too.
Okay, great. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Matt. Our next topic of discussion is Community Housing Fund November referendum, and we're going to discuss the proposed language and abstract for that. The proposed 0.5% tax will be on the public referendum for affordable housing purposes, and we wanted to work on creating language that was easy to understand and met all the requirements of the referendum. So we have Jen Nygrove, Assistant Town Attorney, here today to present. Welcome, Jen. And also there'll be an abstract basically describing what the referendum is about as well, that people will be able to see. So if you believe the board members all have copies of that circulated, our timeline is to have this up for a a resolution to approve. So we'll need to go ahead and approve this language. Please continue.
Good morning, board members. So as the supervisor was telling you, this is our abstract and proposed ballot language that needs to be submitted to the Board of Elections after adoption by the board. We're targeting July 21st for the board to adopt it. And our deadline to get it to the Board of Elections is August 8th. So we are in a timeline here. The abstract was written very beautifully by our outreach committee, and specifically Joanne Pilgrim, who I think did a really nice job summarizing what the purpose of this law is. We as the lawyers, we get the very boring part, which is that little 6 lines at the end of the second page that talks about how it looks on a ballot to propose voters. And when lawyers start out with this type of language, they start out with a lot of words, and then it gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until the average educated person can read it and is not so complicated. So I also want to help thank Jeremy Samuelson for helping us with that endeavor. And also we reached out to the town of Southampton's town attorney's office, and we were exchanging ideas and language as well. So this is the result of that. Are there any questions from the board regarding the proposed language of the ballot proposition?
But why don't you just read for the public's purposes what the actual language is? If you
Sure.
just read the proposed ballot.
So the proposed ballot is to fund affordable housing opportunities in East Hampton Town. Shall local laws amending Chapter 160 of the Town Code entitled Community Housing Opportunity Fund and adding new Chapter 162 entitled Supplemental Real Estate Transfer Tax for Community Housing, establishing a 0.5% tax paid by the purchaser of real property in the town with the revenues deposited in the East Hampton Community Housing Opportunity Fund be approved.
So you can see that's fairly straightforward, and we've removed every unnecessary word that we could possibly think of. And while some ballot propositions seem to have numerous double negatives, I actually called the Board of Elections to ask how many double negatives were we supposed to have, which made them laugh. But we think we've got it down to what is really clear and concise so that the voters can basically understand what it is that we're asking them to vote on. So are there any comments about the proposed language? And then also we'll be attaching an abstract, which I think goes into more detail and gives background and context for this ballot measure.
And how does the abstract get distributed?
So I believe that will be attached. It'll be available at polling places, and it also can be circulated ahead of time as part of public outreach.
Yeah, they don't appear on the ballot together,
Right.
only the ballot language. But obviously you can get the abstract online. And then my understanding, just as the supervisor said, is that it's also given at the place of voting in case anybody wants it or needs it.
So that goes into greater detail, basically gives context, and perhaps you want to just read that as well.
Sure, the abstract.
Yeah.
for the public purposes.
Sure. This is nice. I get to read the
Those at home may not, be able,
nicer language.
may not be able to read it on the screen, so
No, I
think
have it in
hearing
front of
would be
me.
helpful.
Thank you. So the abstract draft is the East Hampton Town Board finds the provision of a variety of housing opportunities for community members across the economic spectrum to be key to maintaining a healthy, sustainable community. The widespread impacts of a lack of affordable community housing are increasingly evident, and town participation is needed to provide new housing options and make existing housing accessible for moderate and lower income local residents. As a result of the housing crisis and high cost of living for local individuals and families, longtime residents are forced to leave the area. Employers are having difficulty finding and retaining employees. Local volunteer emergency service agencies face difficulty in recruitment. Traffic has increased as many who work in East Hampton must commute from elsewhere, and residents of the town may be forced to live in illegal or substandard conditions. To further affordable community housing programs and projects in the town of East Hampton and pursuant to state law, local laws are proposed that would enact a community housing plan and establish a fund to be financed by the proceeds of a proposed 0.5% real estate transfer tax to be paid by purchasers of real estate in the town of East Hampton. The supplemental transfer tax would be in addition to the 2% real estate transfer tax for the Community Preservation Fund, which is earmarked for historic preservation and open space. The Community Housing Fund would be used for a variety of community housing initiatives throughout the town. Existing property owners would pay nothing to the fund. Want to repeat that. Existing property owners would pay nothing to the fund. First-time home buyers would be exempt from paying any transfer tax. In addition, the law would, for home purchasers under $2 million, increase the portion of the purchase price that is exempt from the tax to the first $400,000 of the purchase from $250,000. Purchasers of homes valued at under $1 million would pay less transfer tax than they do currently under this scenario. The fund would be used solely for housing, according to the law, and its use would be regularly audited.
Thank you, Jen. So that sort of gives a little bit finer detail and outline as to what the proposal will mean, and we'll be talking next about the voter information and FAQs. We'll have Jeremy present that. I want to thank Jen and Jeremy and Joanne Pilgrim and all the members of the Community Housing Plan Committee who worked on the language and talked.
I did have a
length
question.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments
If
too.
you want to put that back up. Sure. Okay. So at the top of that second page where it says the Community Housing Fund would be used for a variety of community housing initiatives throughout the town, was any consideration given to including some examples of what that might be?
I don't know because the abstract was a different arm of the committee. That being said, I'm sure that's something the outreach committee can consider. I think that's better detailed in the plan. Obviously, I know that's hard because you don't have the plan in front of you when you're voting. But if that is something the board would like to see, I can certainly relay that.
So we could certainly include some of the possible uses. So, you can use the fund for building new homes or apartments. You can use it for down payment assistance. You can use it to subsidize accessory affordable apartments and homes or detached cottages. You can use it for taking an underlying share in a property to help subsidize an existing home purchase. So there are really quite a few different possible avenues. And, again, we'll be going into greater detail on the next agenda topic, but we could add a few of those just to round
But for
that out
some
a little
folks, I mean, how many times have we gotten calls from people at election time saying, what should I do on the propositions? Sometimes people, don't have an opportunity to educate themselves as much. And I just think Peter, what you just, listed as illustration, I think could
So
be
we'd add those
could be
primaries. So
helpful.
that's not a problem. We could certainly add that to the abstract. Is everybody comfortable with the actual proposition language? It's really been distilled, I think, to
Yeah.
the very bare bones. We really wanted to try to be able to express what this proposition means in the fewest number of words, so people would take the time to read it, would understand it, and then could make an informed decision. So we can add those few items to the abstract just to flesh out what the allowable uses are. The other thing that's not in the abstract, which we might want to add, is just mention of the process in terms of the fact that the law requires that we put together an advisory committee of 7 to 15 people with various backgrounds, from banking to real estate to construction to housing advocacy, and just sort of let folks know that there's an advisory group that would review any potential expenditures and make recommendations to the town board. Town board would then have a public hearing. So there's plenty of opportunity for the public to be involved in the decision-making process. And then after a public hearing, the board could, vote to approve or not, whatever the proposal was for expenditure funds. So we could add a little bit more detail about process there.
I think that would flow naturally from that last sentence that talks about regular auditing. You have an advisory committee. That's,
right.
You're really emphasizing at the end there what your checks and balances are.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, when we, at the bottom of the first page, the supplement there where we talk about the Community Preservation Fund, which is earmarked, and you've just given 2 examples. I mean, recreation should be in there as well. I don't think we should leave something out that is in community. Otherwise, I think that paints us in a corner in the future. So that should be added. And
recreation,
historic preservation, and open space.
Sure.
The paragraph on on the opposite page where it said existing property owners would pay nothing to the fund. First-time home buyers would be exempt from paying any transfer tax. I think instead of saying any, I don't know what any means, any 0.5% or 2%. Which any are we talking about? So I think it should be the word combined so that it is clear. Otherwise, I think I'm not sure people would understand which transfer tax you're talking about.
Any
you're talking
transfer
about
taxes?
Combination. What?
Would it be
And then you'd have to say taxes. Yes.
Right. Would it be alleviated simply by saying any transfer taxes under the town code, or? Because you have 2 types of transfer taxes.
Yes.
Or do you want me to list out both of those taxes?
I'm hopeful that if we just use the word combined taxes, it would be clear.
I like that.
Okay. I mean, my experience.
From paying transfer taxes?
Yeah. My experience is that people don't read everything fully. They want, so this needs to be short as possible so that people will actually read it. If they look at it and it's too long, I know we have people that write long letters to the editor, and sometimes you just skip them because it's just too much. So I think we need to make this appealing.
I don't disagree with making it concise enough that people will take the time to read it. Any other comments or questions? Excellent. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.
So in terms of timeline, we've discussed this today. We'll make those changes to
I'll coordinate with Joanne on that. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
We'll get
then
it
we'll
on.
have that resolution prepared for adoption on the 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have with us our planning director, Jeremy Samuelson, who will go through the community housing voter information. And this is putting a little finer edge on what this referendum will allow and local laws will allow us to do in terms of creating a fund and operating the fund and allowable expenses. Excuse me. Jeremy, welcome.
Good morning, members of the board, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. Very similar to the conversation you've already been having. The goal here is to give people very plain language that describes what this fund does, who's in charge of it, and what the checks and balances are that are in place. So in addition to the material that you've already discussed, we have started trying to think about what an appropriate set of frequently asked questions are that will help people have very digestible answers to what this fund is and how it will be used. So I would like to start, next slide please, with just a refresher on where we are in terms of the broader process here. So in June and July, as you have heard me say in previous conversations, there is a plan that describes over dozens of pages what this fund is and how it could be used. That is available on the town's website. We have encouraged members of the public, anyone that's out there that has questions or ideas, to make themselves familiar with that information and to spend time with the team in my department, or frankly from any number of other departments that also are helping to advance this project, so that the public can have all of its questions answered. And so we're in that June, July public comments welcome period. We're leading up to the first of 2 public hearings that will be necessary for this, the first one of which will be on July 21st. And this is a first public hearing on the housing plan and the adoption of related town code changes. So both of those pieces have to move forward simultaneously in order for the plan to formally be adopted by you all here. We actually need 2 public hearings on this. So you'll note that the second public hearing is tentatively scheduled for September 15th. And again, that's on the housing plan itself, that rather thick document that, similar to the questions that have already been raised. What's the real meat of this? If somebody wants to go beyond either the FAQ or the abstract here and really drill down and understand the housing plan itself is the place to do that. So I anticipate that both on July 21st and September 15th, the board will lead the community through a detailed conversation. There will be hopefully lots of good exchanges and feedback and thoughtful commentary from the community as we work to find our way forward
So
here.
Jeremy, if I could just add that we'll have that hearing, the first public hearing on July 21st for the housing plan. Then we'll have a little bit of time, a few days in which to incorporate any changes based on the first hearing. They will then send that document to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, which will have an opportunity to review it, make comments, and I believe is it 30 days that they have in which to respond. They may decide it's a matter for local determination, or they may make suggestions which we could either adopt or overrule with a supermajority and move on. Please continue.
Thank you. So then the next step after the 2 public hearings that were just described, in October, the town board will conditionally adopt the housing plan. And the word conditionally is important here because, of course, all of this depends on the will of the voters. So when we get to November 8th and election day, the referendum, the language for which was just shared with you, the referendum will be voted up or down, hopefully up. And if it passes, then the housing plan that the town board adopted in October would essentially take effect. So it's a conditional approval that the town board would be putting forward. But just want to clarify. If all of these things go as described on this slide, then January 1 would actually be the start date where revenue for transfers, where somebody would pay the tax here, that would actually start in January of 2023. So that's when revenue would begin. That's when the committee would need to go ahead and start doing its work. And I'll get into a little more detail about that in a moment. So I just want to zoom out for a second. The next couple of questions I'm going to share with you have already been laid out into a document that we're describing as a frequently asked questions document. I think you have copies of it in front of you. Really, we're trying to just pull somebody off the street and say, are you familiar with this? No? Okay, here's the very rough version of this that allows you to hopefully have a thoughtful conversation and to get more into the details and to understand where to go for more information. So right up front, we want people to understand what the Community Housing Fund, or CHF, is. I anticipate that, we all live in a world of acronyms. Anybody who, sort of walks by town hall gets hit with a couple of acronyms. So CPF, of course, as you all know, Community Preservation Fund. I anticipate that we will likely fall into the same routine that our counterparts in Southampton are doing. And if this passes, we'll likely refer to this as the CHF. So we can make that more confusing. Give us a little more time. We'll come up with something, I promise. So the CHF, if approved by the voters on election day, would provide a significant ongoing source of revenue for East Hampton Town to use to create accessible, affordable housing for members of our community. That one bullet right there, if somebody only understands one thing about this project, we want them to hear that question and that answer right up front so they know what this is and what it could be used for. Where the money will come from, it's important that people understand that this is actually a program that, if it is approved by the voters, is authorized under state law and allows East End towns to create a community housing fund that would receive the proceeds of a new 0.5% real estate transfer tax, again, if authorized by the voters. So, we've already talked a little bit about the Community Preservation Fund, the 2% real estate transfer tax that has been in place since 1998. Important for everyone to understand, this proposed 0.5% would be in addition to and alongside that 2%. So the new protocol, as it would emerge should the voters support this, would be a combined total of 2.5% of real estate transfer taxes that would apply within the town of East Hampton. It would remain that 2% of that goes for all of the purposes that Community Preservation Fund is already dedicated to, and the 0.5% would be exclusive to the affordable housing program that we're discussing today. As you heard a moment ago, important to voters as they understand this and make their determination will be an understanding of who will pay this tax. Only those purchasing real estate and not first-time home buyers. So by implication, what that means is if you own a home and you already own that home, doesn't matter if it's paid off, you're still paying your mortgage, none of that matters. If you are in a home and you are paying for that home or own it, you do not pay the tax. In addition, because the first $400,000 of the purchase price would be exempted from transfer taxes, including the existing 2% community real estate, 2% community preservation fund tax, which is used solely for land and historic preservation and recreation, buyers of homes valued at less than approximately $1 million will pay less transfer tax than they do currently. All right. So very important to this conversation is, why do we need this fund? You've heard me share some of these numbers before. If you'll indulge me, I'll share them again here today. Hopefully viewers at home, maybe we have some different folks with us this week. I just really want to continue to emphasize the very dramatic need that we have for a program like this in our town, the dire need, the crisis that we are facing in terms of a need for affordable housing. This is due in part because our population has grown dramatically between the census period of 2010 and 2020. The population, as documented, grew by over a third. I think many of us, myself included, suspect that the numbers are actually greater and that there was an undercount as part of the last census, as we've discussed before. So I would describe that as a minimum number. In addition to that, or during that same period, 600 or over 600 new housing units were created in our town, and those reflected the historic average that we have seen over the last several decades of being a minimum 60% seasonal occupied housing, intended as either second homes or seasonal residences, with 40%, roughly 40% being intended for year-round use. And, so you just think about those two very important segments of our community, and we continue to mirror that trend. And what that brings us to in terms of total housing stock is somewhere around 21,600, just over housing units total. And the reason I share that number with you is that less than 3% of that number of 21,000 is actually confirmed as affordable housing. So we have have documentation through various programs and initiatives of the town and partner organizations that can point to 617 confirmed affordable housing units. So bumper sticker here for everyone to take away is, of our housing stock in the community right now, less than 3% meets the definition of affordable housing. We know the need is far greater than 3%, but that's the tool that we have to address that need presently. That's why we're here. We want to change that. 25% of all town households meet the definition as described by the Census Bureau as severe housing problems. And what that means is that they are paying 50% or more of their income to just keep a roof over their head. So 25% of the people in this town, renters, homeowners, et cetera, are paying over 50% of their income just to have a house. The lower standard of paying a third of your income or 35% of your income, we have 33% of mortgage holders that actually pay more than 35% of their income. And we have over 70% of renters that pay greater than 35% of their income. And if we talk to mortgage experts, if we climb inside why those are important breakpoints for the Census Bureau, that 35% is often, sort of the threshold for where we determine affordability to exist. So if you're paying more than 35%, as many people in this community are, then what we understand is we have a situation where we just don't have affordable housing in this community. Again, the problem we're trying to address and change. This problem is exacerbated by demographic trends throughout the community. What we have seen over not just the previous 10 years of the census period between 2010 and 2020, but for a longer period of time than that, is that the median age in our community, specifically East Hampton Town, is rising. It has been rising and it continues to rise to the point where we are over 5 years older on average in East Hampton Town than the balance of Suffolk County. That gets us to an average age in our community of just over 46 years, or actually almost 47 years old. That puts us ahead of the nation, it puts us ahead of the state, and it puts us ahead of the balance of Suffolk County. One of the reasons we're seeing this is fewer young adults are able to remain. There's no headline there for anyone that has been here a while. We have all seen this, but we have demographic data from the census to back this up, and we know that young adults and families are actually decreasing as a percentage of population. So families in this town that are two-parent households actually only grew by 11% of the population, while the broader population grew at roughly 1/3. And so all that means is that percentage of the population is growing more slowly, right? So we're not losing them, we're not actually having lower numbers, but they're growing more slowly. Where we do actually have lower numbers are in single parent households. Those radically dropped by 25%. And I think it's not too big a leap to say that the complications associated with finding appropriate, safe, legal housing in our community contributed as a meaningful factor to that drop. So, unlike the two-parent households where I was describing that it's growing more slowly, this is actually a reduction of 25%. I think, personally, morally, that means we're failing that portion of our community.
Can I just say something here? So if I was a single family household, I'm married, I have a wonderful wife, she has a great job. I would be on the median age. I would be a single family per household, and I would be paying more than 33% of my mortgage personally. And I sit here at this dais right now.
Exactly.
And that's just exactly how it is out here.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm listening to this right now. I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, one of the ideas that we want to bring forward here is, who is affordable housing? It is people who work for the town. It's people who are volunteering in fire departments. It's people who are working for schools. I think there's this specious idea that creeps into these conversations sometimes where, we want to pretend that it's the other. However we define that, it's people we don't know. It's people that didn't grow up here. It's people who came here from somewhere else. It's people who do jobs that, we could live without. And I think the last couple of years have really proven the lie there. When we look around in any given room, in any store, at any ball game, those are the faces of affordable housing. And I think the community has begun to come to terms with this, and that's why this program is so important and this opportunity is so important. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Because
I mean, it's just honest.
Exactly. So
I think, and that's, I think, why we are working so hard on that then too. We sit here, we know that, we have children, we know what that need is then too. So I'm sorry for that one.
No, absolutely. I think these are the right conversations for us to be having. So, back to sort of the more FAQ part of this, one of the other questions that people have asked very quickly, even if their heart is in it, they want to know is, responsible citizens before they authorize something, how will the money be spent? And so we've worked hard to think about what the plain language ways are to describe this program and how the money will be spent. It will fund or rather the fund will be used to buy land and build houses and apartments for rent and for sale. Now, in one line, that is probably sort of the bulk of the work that can happen through the creation of this fund. Some of those units will be built by the town, others would be through public-private partnerships. Private homeowners will also be able to apply for funding to add one accessory apartment unit, or ADU as they are sometimes referred to a house where they live. So a couple of very important things here. Must be owner occupied, right? You only get one of these. You can't add more than one. And there's very strict criteria for total square footage, whether it's attached, unattached, minimum property size. All of those zoning regulations will still apply here. In addition, qualifying homeowners will be able to apply for up to 50% down payment assistance for homes up to roughly $1 million. The number's actually a hair over 1 million, but people like round numbers. So who will actually get a house or an apartment? Several types of housing could be created, serving different segments of the community. One of the strengths of this program is that it is not just one thing. There are many different types of need that are represented in our community. And I think one of the strengths of this is that we have the opportunity to address more than one of those needs. This is not a silver bullet. It is an attempt to do good in multiple categories. Town-built housing will be filled by town residents on the town's affordable housing list. Individuals, couples, two-parent families, single-parent families will all be eligible if they meet income guidelines of up to 150% of regional median income. So again, there are multiple opportunities, multiple programs here. The sort of max that is baked in there is 150%. Some different programs have lower thresholds, but I wanted to point out what the maximum threshold is here. And we should bake in that number here. I can anticipate the question coming already, so I'll just go ahead and say in our next pass at this, we'll put that number in. Accessory apartments will be rented directly, and off the top of my head, don't hold me to this, I think it's about $150,000. So that would apply to a couple. Accessory apartments will be rented directly by homeowners with rent levels verified by the town to ensure affordable prices. So should somebody choose to apply to this program and get funded, and they wanted to use the money to create an accessory apartment on their house, then they would be in charge of selecting who it is that they would rent to. And the only role for the town at that point would be to make sure on an annual basis that it is continues to be rented for an affordable price, and there would be documentation that would need to be submitted to the town, similar to a separate program that's already ongoing for the town, where they would demonstrate on an annual basis this is continuing to be rented, and this is sworn affidavits. So you have to shoot straight on this stuff, and it proves that the money that has been invested is actually generating the good that we want to see created here.
Jeremy, on that one, could you add the words year-round? Accessory apartments will be rented year-round.
Excellent point. Happy to, because I think that really matters here.
Yeah.
Okay. How will the money be spent? We already covered that. Who decides and how? A committee of experts, this is, the supervisor was referring to this earlier, a committee of experts from housing nonprofits, the construction trades, real estate, and banking will be appointed by the town board to review applications and make funding recommendations. Committee members are volunteers and must be town residents. The committee would be composed of between 7 and 15 people. Committee recommendations are strictly advisory. with funding decisions requiring a public hearing and approval by town board. So to just kind of make that as clear as possible for members of the public or folks at home, what that means is this committee would exist. They would have a very clear and transparent process for applying for funding, whether that would be a public-private partnership to build several units of apartments on a dedicated piece of land, or whether it was an individual stepping forward saying, I'd like to apply for funds to use on my property to create an accessory dwelling unit. However they come to the table, there would be this committee that would have very clear, transparent process where somebody would apply, similar to how the CPF fund currently works. That committee would receive and review that application based on their expertise, the criteria of the program, would then make a recommendation to you all as the town board, who would be required by law to have a public hearing where anybody could come and speak on the individual application, offer their thoughts, and then you all would vote, and this would all be, again, a matter of public record. The exception to the process I just described would be for applications for down payment assistance, which would be handled administratively by the town's housing department, similar to how they are currently handled. So as you all know, we have an existing down payment assistance program that would largely continue as it is now with should you all choose to fund it, an additional infusion of funds made available to help support that specific program. So people always want to know how many units will be built and how quickly can we make this good happen. And the real answer is, truthfully, we don't know, because there are things here beyond our control. What's the real estate market doing? This is all ultimately tied back to the real estate market. How quickly it churns over decides, how quickly 0.5% of revenue gets churned, and then therefore how much money is available. So the number of units created and how quickly will depend on how much money the fund raises and the recommendations of the committee, the CHF committee, and approval by the town board. The fund is intended to be flexible, to respond to needs as they emerge, and to duplicate successes once the program is fully implemented. On that final point, I think if folks think back to the early days of the Community Preservation Fund over 20 years ago now, the types of priority projects that were being funded in the early days of that program are different than the types of priority projects that the committee is currently evaluating today. That's because conditions have changed. The real estate market has changed. What's available has changed. And I would anticipate, should this fund be approved, that what we would see in 10 years might look a little bit different than what we're seeing now. The rules of the game are spelled out. You can do a certain list of types of projects, and those will all remain. But where the emphasis falls based on the market sort of speaking a little, do people want to come forward and propose accessory units, or are we looking at more public-private partnerships that are building 5 units and 10 units here and there? I don't know. And so I don't want to over prescribe what the answer to that may be, but I just want to point out that those opportunities exist, and we have to allow that market to sort of steer us a little bit. How much will the fund raise? We estimate that based on the last several years of real estate activity, and there have been some anomalies in there with the pandemic, et cetera, we anticipate that there will likely be, in the next several years, somewhere between $6 million and $12 million that would become available each year, again, depending on the real estate market. It's worth noting that if last year were a year where this fund had been in place, then I think it would have been something like 17 million that would have accrued. But again, I'll use that word anomalous and say that that was a moment in time driven by world events. So I'm happy to clarify or answer any questions for you at this time.
Questions or comments for Jeremy?
Yeah, I just, a couple things. One was on page 3, when Sylvia had brought up talking about the Community Preservation Fund, which is used solely for, in the abstract, I think we said open, historic preservation and open space. In the FAQs, we say, which is used solely for land and historic preservation. I think that's the difference. They used land in the FAQ and open space, which is, obviously 2 different things, because we purchase land for open space, for historic preservation, for recreation and for agriculture.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be consistent across our documents as what the language is we want to use. And then Jeremy, on page 4, when you talk about need, this brings to mind the meeting we had, which I was actually going to bring up in my liaison report, of the 114 project, our working group, which we had a meeting. We're meeting every other week. I scheduled it for an hour. We kicked everybody out after 2.5 hours because everybody was, I think people were waving to me because we were here at 5:30 last Wednesday as everybody was leaving. And we were having this like philosophical discussion, right? Like when we were talking about the unit size, we had originally said, 1-bedroom units. And then the question came up, are we building for what we need now, which, Katie Casey is saying we need 1-bedroom units, or are we building for what we are losing, right? And you look at page 4, where we say there's fewer young adults and families, and single parent households has dropped 25%. So or is it a combination thereof? So, we get into the weeds in those discussions, which is great. And there's so many people in the group that have a lot of expertise and have done this before, like Katie and Amato Ortiz from the Housing Authority, and Ed Reale for that matter. So it just, when I see it again, in your PowerPoint, it made me think about those hard conversations we were having, and last Wednesday.
I think the takeaway there is that the need is so broad that it encompasses every single aspect of housing in the community, whether it be seasonal or single folks looking for housing, whether it be single parent households or just dual parent households. It just runs the gamut. Everybody is struggling. If you have to rely on a local job for a living, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to live here anymore. And so I think that's really the message, and we need to do everything we can to balance that trend back to a community that has, you don't have a community without community members, and how incredibly important that is to every aspect from services, whether they be emergency services or just, plumbers, electricians, whatever, servicing housing, nurses at our hospital. Everybody is struggling in terms of hiring and retaining staff, from the town municipality to the hospital, school districts, businesses, and it all comes back to housing.
And then I know we've talked a lot of times, what we use as an example is the hospitality industry, but you bring up hospitals and nurses. And just what I shared with the working group is I went for my primary care visit in early June. And so now I have to make a couple of follow-up appointments. I tried to make my well visit for the gynecologist, and they were booking in January. Mammographies are 4 to 5 months out. The gastroenterologist, one retired in town or in Southampton, one was leaving town. So that appointment is in December. And that's the reality now because of our lack of affordable housing. The folks that, and we're looking at an aging population, and it's taking, months and months to get appointments. And it's no reflection on the medical system and the hospital. It's just, we need to add units. And as you said, Peter, it's single family homes, it's apartments, it's, accessory apartments, and, we have to strike while it's hot, and hopefully the community, I know we can't advocate for the referendum in November, but I hope people will educate themselves.
Yeah, I think when I listen to everyone talk about which sector is impacted, the word, and I look at the words that we use in titles and stuff, the word that we're all talking about is community. Our East Hampton community is greatly impacted by so many factors at this point of the inability to provide affordable housing, or housing that let me even change that to housing that year-round local people can afford to live in, can afford to purchase, is now at that level of crisis. We're at maybe the second or third level of impacts, but what's to come down the line if we don't act now? And so that's why we can talk about every sector, because it's the entire community that's impacted, and that's what. Well, we're always have been, and will in the future, look to have a sustainable environment. We can't have anything without a community that we can sustain as well. So I'm looking forward to the November vote on this, because I do think folks are getting it. I do think they understand, because there's not any of us that aren't impacted.
So in terms of voter information, are there any other pieces of information that board members feel that we should add at this point?
Well, it's not, for me, it's not adding, it's repackaging it. On our town's website right now, if you go to the town's website, we have a dedicated page on there. If you scroll down to the Community Housing Fund, but it's got a lot of documents on it right now that we've been built up and adding to try to get to the public. I think we should par that down either can we par that down or redesign that webpage for this?
I think putting up, the frequently asked questions and whatnot.
Yeah.
To do a summary and consolidate the general.
That's right.
If they want to look at, I think it's important to have the specific documents that those who want to delve deeper, but
correct.
To your point, having a summary and FAQs, voter information is important. And that's part of the exercise today, is to try to look through.
I would say we can look at that.
So, if you do come up with any other suggestions or whatever, let us know, and we'll make those changes and get those up.
Thank you.
Well, I think the chart that Jeremy presented last month, where it showed that the house price and what it would be now if that law didn't pass, or if that referendum didn't pass, and I think that was a critical piece and could be added to the FAQs.
Great. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. I want to thank Jeremy and Eric Shantz from the Planning Department, as well as Jen Nigro from Assistant Town Attorney, our committee chair, John Yellen, Rick Whalen, Thomas Crouch, Jackie Lowy, and Joanne Pilgrim, my office, who worked very hard and long to both prepare the legislation that we will be voting on. We've had our hearing. So in terms of timeline, we have basically 3 different things we're working on. We're looking to have the hearings and adopt the community housing plan. We have the changes to the code, which we've already heard. So we'll have a resolution to adopt those chapter 160, 162 changes on July 21st. There'll be a resolution for that. We've discussed the referendum language that has to be finalized and submitted to Board of Elections no later than August 8th. In speaking with them, they would prefer to have that on August 1st. So we'll have that resolution again to approve that language on July 21st, and then and route that to them plenty of time in case anything would need to be changed. And in terms of the Community Housing Fund plan, again, we'll have our first hearing on July 21st. We'll have a few days to make any revisions based on the feedback we get from the hearing. Submit those revisions to the Suffolk County Planning Commission, who will have 30 days in which to weigh in. We'll have August 24th will be the last day for the Planning Commission to submit context. The period ends there for comments, and then any draft changes prior to. And then we'll schedule on September 1st, hearing number 2 for the 15th of September. And then beyond that, it's just waiting for that referendum on November 8th, Election Day, which, if the voters approve, will trigger the implementation of Chapter 160, 162, and the Community Housing Plan, which becomes, and the reason the Suffolk County Planning Commission reviews this is it will become part of our town comprehensive plan. So thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And that brings us up to our last agenda item, today, which is the Montauk Transfer Development Rights Study Grant application. And Jeremy, are you going to give us a run through of that? I know Eric's here also.
I thought there was a rule I had to like step away and come back.
Step away from the podium.
Yeah, so I'll give you a brief sketch here. I mean, what we're really seeking is we filled out the paperwork to submit to you all for your review as part of a grant funding request that we'd like to pursue. So New York State, some years ago, I think, as you all know, decided to take a bunch of different grant programs and get them bundled under an umbrella called the Consolidated Funding Application. And so many of the state's award programs are now administered through this consolidated program, including grants that touch down in areas of coastal resiliency, the local waterfront revitalization plan, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. So Department of State, New York State Department of State, which as you all know is in charge broadly of a lot of coastal policy and coastal planning issues, has a dedicated funding line in this year's grant funding opportunities, which is something like $17 or $18 million throughout the state that's available for communities to apply for updates to their local front revitalization plan. And there's a couple of different categories in there. So the funding amount I just mentioned to you was specific to a program that is very appealing to our needs at this time, which is to identify a project that is in our local waterfront revitalization plan and to bring that forward for implementation. And so we sat down knowing that there's plenty of work to do in this broader subject area. We sat down with the Waterfront Advisory Committee and with the committee's liaison, Kate Rogers, and had a real robust conversation, pulling in our counterparts from natural resources, the committee itself, and even folks from across the hall and building, and tried to figure out which of the projects that is described in our adopted LWRP felt like the next big thing for us to take on here. And what immediately jumped out at us was this notion of revitalizing downtown Montauk. And that's a big conversation, and it can mean a lot of different things. So we had to spend some time sort of, I guess, sanding that down, or whittling that down is maybe a better way to put it. So right now what we are proposing is a grant application that would be submitted for the July 29 deadline that would pull together expertise from several different disciplines to look at what the future of downtown Montauk can look like. And the subject area, we keep saying downtown, but what we're really talking about is, what was the term we came up with yesterday?
Montauk business area.
Right. So this was Kate's observation in looking at the map, Councilwoman Rogers' observation in looking at this, is that when we say to somebody downtown, I think they really sort of think a block or two away from the circle in downtown Montauk. And what we're really talking about is a series of systems that can make sure that that area plus its associated areas are actually protected, both in the event of a major storm and also as sea level rises and groundwater rises over time, and also the broader need to just redevelop the community with walkability, connectivity, all of those things that make a place appealing and safe, and the type of family-friendly resort community that we're interested in seeing maintained and in fact even enhanced going forward. So I really describe this as an economic sustainability project for Montauk. The subject area, if we drew a map for you, it would actually be the oceanfront beach all the way over to the Benson Reservation on one side and down to Atlantic Terrace on the other side, so getting up into Surfside over there. And then if you took it up to the skate park and brought it down behind the ball fields and went up Flamingo Road all the way up to the firehouse, came over to the train station, Station and then went by Rough Riders over to the shore of Fort Pond Bay and then came down Second House, down. So that sort of a big rectangle with, Fort Pond in the middle of it. These are all connected systems, as you all know well. So what we found when we started climbing inside of this and thinking about what the future of Montauk is, you can't really identify one of the issues that needs our attention and just try to pull that out and solve it in isolation. The problems are bigger than that, and the solutions are really integrated. So when you start talking about where are you going to put stormwater and how does that relate to how pedestrians can move safely through a space, what do we want the role for bike lanes to be, getting people safely from either the docks or the train station into the heart of downtown. When we think about projects like the first roundabout that's now going to be proposed and enhancing that transportation network, when you take that comprehensive look, there's sort of a discrete entity that we were able to identify on a map, and it aligned neatly with the recommendations that are in the local waterfront revitalization plan. So critical to the future of downtown Montauk is acknowledging that the world is changing around us, that climate change is real, that what that means is that for every inch of sea level rise in the ocean, there's also a corresponding inch of rise in the groundwater beneath our feet, and all of the complications that come along with that, for everything from where does our drinking water come from, where does our stormwater go, where does our wastewater go, where can we park, where does it flood routinely, where do we need to make sure that people have the ability to shelter safely in place. So we looked within that area and said this is ripe for a major look here, so that we can actually make sure that there is a future sustainable, economically sustainable future for Montauk.
So is this 2 applications to the CFA, or is this still the LWRP update and then?
This is a single application to the Consolidated Funding Application Program through Department of State, New York State Department of State. The anticipated funding amount would be $525,000 that we would be requesting from the state. There is a match that would be required there of 25%, so get you to a nice round number of total project costs of $700,000. The match would be eligible for either being offset by projects like this, the Roundabout project, or the placement of sand on the beach in downtown Montauk, or the burying of the power lines, or the Living Shorelines project that is proposed through the Natural Resources Department. We have no end of really good work that's happening within this subject area. There's even a grant that the town was awarded several years ago that Councilman Lisa and I have been trying to figure out if we want to go back to Suffolk County and say yes to some, or
we also have the other grant from the county that we're applying for downtown revitalization, a smaller grant.
Exactly. So I think the point here being the match of $125,000, we're going to get to that very easily. And in addition to that, staff time working on this can actually count towards the match as well. So we think there's enough work asking the broad question, what's the future of the business community in what I'll call downtown Montauk, but you understand the broader geography that we're talking about here, so that we can make sure that we can not only weather a storm, but have a sustainable community going forward. Whether we, knock wood when I say this, are unfortunate enough to get hit by a major storm or not, we will still need to make improvements and enhancements to our community over time. And this is really an application to do the hard work of the planning, so that when the need actually arises, God forbid there's a storm or there's an opportunity for creating anything from bike lanes to walkable communities, we've already done the hard work that allows that to happen.
So I support this, and I support using the CFA as a vessel for applications right now. 4 years ago, we were successful with the aquaculture project then too. We haven't done anything in the last 2 years, I believe, any applications. So knowing that the 29th, it all has to be in, and what you're expressing right now within the LWRP components on there, I think it's advisable for us to move on it.
Thank you, David. We're also taking a look at looking at this area in terms of all the studies that have been done on it, the LWRP for implementation, the existing LWRP, the CARP plan recommendations, the Hamlet studies. I mean, not treating everything as a kind of a separate study, but incorporating all of the recommendations into a overall plan for this area.
And while at times I'm always like, why are we doing another study? When we get to action, if we can put them all together, I think that plan of action is going to come out when they're all morphed together or interspun.
I agree. I think we're at the implementation times of the world at this point.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm confused. Why? So are we not going for an update for the LWRP, or no, that's on hold and we're looking to do this project?
Since these grants are available and we are thinking that, you know, missing out on these implementation grants would be not in the best interest of the community, to put any update for the LWRP on hold for the larger, huge document and look at what's already in the implementation.
Yeah, because it's how the CFA works is that they typically put a spotlight on a specific pot of funding for each calendar year that they're trying to highlight then too. I know we did, that's why we were successful with the aquaculture project years ago. And if that's what they're looking for and that they're going to try to prioritize, it's smart to go after what they're going to prioritize or get something to them. It seems like we have our ducks in a row to actually make it a very strong application right now. Not a lot of other townships probably will be in that position to do so.
And when we list the matching, I mean, you can even incorporate transportation like the hopper, the funding for the hopper. There's no real limit to the matching for this grant.
Why did we call this the Montauk TDR study grant application?
So and I'm glad you brought that up, a very important component of the future of Montauk, whether you're looking at the north side or the south side area that folks would refer to as downtown, is how are we going to create an economically sustainable community by incentivizing people to take the next step moving back from the shoreline? So what is necessary to allow people to say yes to doing the thing that must be done? We know that, God forbid, a major storm event happens, the inclination will be to build the same thing in the same place, because all of the procedures and processes for permitting under an emergency basis are skewed towards rebuilding the same thing in the same place. And what we know is that's not the best answer for the future of our community. We need an economically viable community that is based on a resort economy, that has a seasonal inflow and has shoulder seasons and an off season. I don't think we're going to fundamentally adjust that model. So within those constraints, when the thing happens that all of us hope won't happen, we have to be prepared. We have a responsibility to say to people, you have options in addition to and instead of only being allowed to build the same thing in the same place. We want to give people options to move back, move up, and incentivize them to do things that work for their business model and where they need to go to ensure their economic viability, and therefore to ensure that they remain a vital part of our community. And if we don't do this work in advance, then we're going to be stuck in this feedback loop that always happens in these situations where, God forbid, something major impacts our coastline. Then we're really going to be in a position of either saying yes to rebuilding what was there before, or on the fly trying to figure out what the better answer is. And I think now the sensible thing for us to do is to breathe deeply, look at it, and engage deeply with the community. And that has to be part of exactly what this is all about. We must be sitting with the community. We must be listening. We must be responsive to what their needs and aspirations are. And then we have to work with what those hopes are, so that whatever the future version of Montauk is, that it meets their needs and also upholds not just the codes of this community, but the broader community's desires for what they want to see there as well. Having that,
and if it gets paid by taxpayers that aren't necessarily from our tax base, and know they're paying to the state on their I don't see any reason why not,
Yeah.
why not to do it.
Absolutely. And trying to have that conversation after the storm and figure out what the better version of a code is virtually impossible. We must do better.
That's not planning to do it that way. That's just we have to make sure we don't put our heads in the sand, so to speak, and have a clear view of providing those options to folks in the future.
But it's also taking an opportunity to get a grant to do so.
And that part too.
Yeah, that's it. $500,000 is a nice chunk of change if we can get someone in Plattsburgh,
Correct.
to pay into it. So why? I mean, it makes sense to do. I would support the application as it came in and get ready for the CFA 4 p.m. on July 29th.
No pressure. Yeah.
You're ready, right?
Well, it's good. I mean,
I'll hand you my pen to
always
sign.
Peter will sign it, but I support it. It's always something to go forward with the CFA, and I think we should consistently look at that opportunity if it's there for things that need in the town right now.
Any other questions or
No, I'm in
comments?
support.
Just another comment. One of the things that I recall talking to my colleagues about years ago is that we did the CARP study and we saw where we're vulnerable. And I think, with CPF, we've done the Lake Montauk outreach, we've done a Springs outreach, but have we ever really taken the maps from CARP and taken a look at where we're most vulnerable and laid that over and given that to Scott so that when we are looking at properties that we could say that, point towards this is, the rationale for wanting to preserve that piece of property. And I think that
No, well,
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
I think we need to formalize it more.
Because-
I guess,
No,
Because
I
there
agree
has
with
been-
that. That's a good point.
a CARP outreach.
There has been consideration of sea level rise, certainly with
Yeah.
our acquisitions, particularly around all of our harbors.
Yeah.
And we've done, I think, a very good job thus far. It is a willing seller program, but we've had a number of successes in Montauk and Springs and Northwest Woods and all over town in those areas, which are most vulnerable. We've had a couple recent acquisitions in those areas as well across town.
Right.
But I think we should formalize it.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
I could bring that to
It's
the
another
advisory
reason.
committee
Yeah.
then too.
And a good reason, appropriate reason.
And it's an allowable reason too, actually, because that was changed within the state a couple of years ago.
Correct. It was.
Any other comments? So we'll look forward to seeing the application, which I will sign.
Thank you for your support,
Jeremy.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep, thanks.
So that brings us up to liaison reports. Kathy, you have a liaison report?
I do. So last week or more, we've been, continuing to work on the new senior center with our architects R2. And we've gone live today with the survey that I talked about that was informed by the listening sessions that we had in May. And we're asking residents to take that survey. We've sent out press releases in English and Spanish. You should all have gotten an email from Gabriella with the press release in English and Spanish, as well as the flyers. We ask that you send it out to your committees. We're looking to do outreach. It's about 10 questions plus some, demographic information. Should only take community members a few minutes to fill out, and it will, help us create a shared vision for the new center that we're looking to build at 403 Abraham's Path in Amagansett. And these results will help us inform programming and the design direction. Also, last Friday, we met with Michelle Basilico from our nutrition program and Isaac Lopez and others so that we can help the R2 team, come back with a schematic design on how things function, how much space everyone needs in the new building. We also talked about the kitchen and agreed that we're going to need new appliances if we're going to be building a net zero facility. And then we've just set up the Zoom with our town historian, Hugh King, and other members of the historical societies, and that's going to be on Monday afternoon.
That sounds like a fun project.
Yeah, it never stops. There's just so much work to do, and R2 is so engaged, and some of the questions and things and their deep wealth of of knowledge and information, having done these types of facilities before. It's sometimes you ask yourself, why'd they ask that question? And then it plays itself out. So it's really been a very exciting project to work on. We're introducing a new class for the over 60 community. It's a senior fitness class called Fit and Strong. It starts this Friday, July 15th, and it meets each Friday for the next 6 weeks. So it goes at 1:00 in the afternoon. It's an hour. If anybody has any questions, they should reach out to the Senior Center at 631-329-6939. Switching gears to the Special Events Committee, Kate and I can attest there are no shortage of applications. They're coming at us fast and furious. We've got 3 staff members almost working full time on processing these applications. So I just want to let the community know it's to everyone's benefit to get your application in as soon as you have an idea of having an event or a party or something down on the beach. We did change the code earlier in the year to give the committee more time to review and react to these applications, but folks are not always following that guideline. And, the reality is if we don't get the application in a timely fashion and have the ability to review it, your event could be denied on those grounds. I did mention, during Jeremy's presentation about the Route 114 project, which is, it's been pretty exciting to work on as well. And then last night, the East Hampton CAC met, and since we got bumped because of 4th of July, we couldn't meet in this room. We met on the picnic tables underneath the tree, and it was very pleasant out there. And we discussed, which comes up every meeting, they're very much interested in us looking at the roundabout, at Long Lane, 2 Holes of Water, and Stephen Hand's Path. And, David and I have been talking, and with the drainage project that we just, bonded for, like now would be the time to really get that started. We had gotten a proposal from McLean for the engineering on that. It's $177,500. We've also got a proposal for them for safety improvements for that triangle, at Stephen Hand's Path, Cedar Street, and Old Northwest. And that proposal was $32,000. And David had suggested that, we look at highway surplus. So we had a conversation with Becky today, and the audited reports for 2021 is that we have $6.3 million in highway surplus, and this type of, a little over 200,000, this type of engineering is perfect for, for the use of those funds. So we would hope that the board would support that. If maybe we could put that on, David, for next week from Thursday.
I'm supportive. I know that intersection very well. It's very treacherous given the volumes of traffic there. And anything that can be done to improve safety and traffic calming, it would be very welcome. We've had numerous emails and phone calls about that intersection. So I would be supportive of moving forward with designing a roundabout there.
It hasn't gotten better.
No.
And right now
I can attest to that. Deal with it every
with
day.
the upcoming project that we have for the drainage, also right now is the perfect time to start to analyze that also. And there might be an economy to scale at some point on it too. So I would support that, and I'll work there. Talk to Steve.
Right. And then that in that triangle, that little stretch of Stephen Hand's Path where, it had come to us a few months ago about making it one way, and we decided not to move forward. Steve has made like a right turning
angle.
lane.
Yeah.
So, the committee is always very supportive of the striping going down and the white fog line. So I'm going to follow up with him to see when that work is done, when that will be painted.
Drove out this morning and noticed that on Swamp Road, they just put the fog lines in. I think last
There's
night.
a lot of new fog lines because
Last
it's
night, they
bright
did
white.
yeah,
I'm
they've been
noticing
painting.
all over town.
All over town. I think they've been doing that at night or early morning hours. So there's an opportunity to drive before it gets heavily trafficked. But on our rural roadways, especially those going through woodlands, having that fog stripe's important
Yeah.
for people
And
to
an
know where
aging
the road
population.
actually ends.
You know? The other thing that came up was Floyd Street. There was an accident. I think it was the Friday or 4th of July weekend where, where the portion that's the one way, there was, I guess, a head-on collision and whatnot. I know Steve has increased some of the signage over there on Spinner. On the stop sign, he put a no right turn lane, but apparently, we think some of it is the driving apps like Waves that are telling people, from Acabonic to go Floyd Street and doesn't realize that halfway through it becomes a one-way.
Oh, boy.
So, I'm going to, again, reach out to Steve and see if there's anything else we can do, because there's one of our CAC members lives on Floyd Street and holds his breath when he sees the cars coming through. Also, we had a conversation about West Drive and Morris Park Lane, and there was some talk about maybe some of the folks on Morris Park Lane might want to make their road a dead end because of so much through traffic coming, cutting across between 3 Mile Harbor and Springs Fireplace Road. Also came up the illegal installation of temporary signs. So I'm going to reach out to Kevin Cooper, our Director of Code Enforcement. And then we had David McMaster last night attend the meeting because we had gotten, one of the members lives in Settlers Landing, and there's been some incidents in Settlers Landing with dogs, biting other dogs and dog attacks and things. So David came to explain the history of that, what had transpired in Justice Court, and answer any questions that members of the committee had. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy. David?
Excuse me. Yes, thank you very much. I just want to remind all the residents that the town is still providing free summer bus service within Montauk. The Hampton Hopper hop-on, hop-off bus service is free to ride and is provided daily all through the summer through September 4th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Town of East Hampton is still accepting water quality applications for the second round of the water quality improvement projects for 2022. Proposals are due back on August 1st before 4 p.m. Any questions, please contact our Natural Resources Department. The Great Bonnet fireworks are being held in 3 Mile Harbor this Saturday. I first of all want to say a shout out to Billy Calback and the Clamshell Foundation, and also to our dearly departed friend Rossetti Perchek for continuing that tradition. And the result of that then would be no the shellfishing hatchery, not the hatchery, the shellfishing in that area is going to be closed until further notice after that date. Typically that's about Wednesday, but please check with aquaculture about that also then too. Last week, we accepted the proposal for debris removal for Westlake Drive docks. That work is underway. Probably as of today, it's going to take a couple of days. I ran into Anthony.
Littman?
No,
Montauk Dock?
Yeah, Lobsterman.
Little Anthony?
Yes. This weekend, apologize. It's Sikorsky.
Szynski.
I apologize, Anthony. He says, thank you very much for doing that. By showing up, what he explained, actually, I didn't really recognize it. A lot of the big boats on the other side with their props push a lot of that sand into the little boat area. That's working today. And then we're hoping the contractor will be heading over to the Star Island to start the work over there. The Montauk CAC did meet last night also. I think a lot of our CACs maybe met. They discussed Marine Patrol, but continue adding more patrols as needed. They're saying a lot of the beach work on the beaches is going well as far as the cleanliness of the beaches, but if they can extend their patrols further west down to the Montauk Beach Property Owners Association, that'd be great. The airport subcommittee did have a discussion. The discussion was about the sale of the Montauk Airport. They're still saying that we should be engaging with outside plaintiffs, and that no one also mentioned who might have bought the airport. Again, we went on to the discussion of the roundabout, the conceptual plan of the roundabout, which we already discussed. That led into a discussion about motorized e-bikes on there then too. And motorized e-bikes are now becoming widely used, not just in Montauk and other areas, and also electric scooters. And that scooters
Yeah, scooters.
Are they scooters? Are they scooters?
Scooters, yeah.
And that some individuals aren't using those scooters appropriately. I did reach out to the chief of police earlier than that. I heard that the VTL laws are being updated, and that he said the police department, now the enforcement agencies are starting to get the information about the New York State VTLs, which are governing these motorized e-bikes, but there might be a greater discussion coming down the road.
Yeah, the business committees also discussed
Yeah.
this, and there's a big gray area now going on,
Yeah,
and
so-
how that's going to affect safety issues.
So these bikes and the VTLs can only go a certain speed, only could be ridden by a certain person, only certain locations they can go on. They can't go on roads over a certain speed limit, so unless there's a bike lane. So there's a lot going on there, but also there is local powers to control if need be. So they're having discussions on that
All right.
also. And I would probably like to have that discussion too at the board level at some point.
All right, thanks, David.
No problem. Let's see here. I'm missing something. Yes, this is it. I would like to invite the public. I will have two resolutions on. One of the resolutions I have on today is for the dedication of the multi-use path at the Buckskill Meadows Park in the name of Louis Zachary Cohen, a distinguished member of our community, former chairman of the Nature Preserve Committee, and I believe the Springs CAC for a while also. That dedication of this brand new park, which has a multi-use path, it's a wonderful park, is going to be set for July 18th, Monday at 11 a.m. I hope all can attend. Be nice and quick, and it's a wonderful park for the community to start using. Lastly, I want to let the public know that Roger Walker, who is our former Justice of the Peace for the town of East Hampton, passed last week. I never called him Roger. I always called him Mr. Walker because I knew him from church. And I would go all the time. He was an elder at church and a very good friend of my dad, and probably one of the only reasons my dad would go to church. Mr. Walker's family was always great to me growing up, going to Heifer Project and such and having a lot of fun. He always had sage advice for me. Son, David, come over here. Have a seat here. He was always in the last pew, wanted me to sit down, had my ear for a little bit. And it was always nice to see Mr. Walker. He was a true man of the hamlet of Wainscott. He was a servant to the town of East Hampton. He was a friend of my family. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And you mentioned, resident of Wainscott, he's what's known as a dumpling, which there are so very few dumplings around. And a dumpling, for those who don't know, is someone who is born in Wainscott and lives their entire life there. Did I get that right, Carol? Okay. Born and died in the same house.
He was an impressive man.
Yeah, so we'll miss him. He also was a code enforcement, worked code enforcement in early 90s, maybe, was it? For the town. So had a lot of involvement locally here in the town, and we'll miss him. Thank you, David. Sylvia, do you have a report for us?
I do. I'm going to start with the business committee that met on Wednesday. And as always, we had Robert Ross from the Southampton Hospital there giving us a report on the COVID, the status of COVID at the hospital. Southampton Hospital has 7 COVID patients. Stony Brook Hospital has 49 COVID patients. That's an increase of from 41 to 49 over the 2-week period. 4 are in ICU, 2 are on ventilators. And Eastern Long Island has 6 COVID patients. That's almost the most they've had throughout the entire pandemic. They did do testing on 7-1, 7-2, and 7-4, and it ranged from 12% to 22.8%. In positivity. These were small numbers of folks that went there, but it's still alarming to kind of see this increase. They are discontinuing vaccinations for July and August. So vaccinations need to be at the pharmacies or your doctor or other emergency outlets that are in the community. We did do quickly a meeting on the update. We had an update on the meeting that was held on Wednesday, January 29th, and I really have to thank everybody that attended, which was the supervisor and David Lease, along with David Brown, Kevin Cooper, I have them all written down here, and David McMaster all attended a meeting that was done by Jen Faqs from the Montauk Chamber of Commerce. She set it up at the firehouse. About 20 members from the Montauk Chamber came, and it was very helpful, according to Jen, in having the town arrive and help about outdoor dining and outdoor lighting that was going on, and trying to help that community have a successful summer. So thank you guys for being there.
Happy to be there. I thought it was very productive and appreciated by all.
Yes.
To have those open conversations about the needs of the business community.
So then the next day, on June 30th, the town planning director, Jeremy Samuelson, and assistant town attorney Eric Shantz went to the Montauk Chamber with the applications for the outdoor dining and for any administrative lighting that they might want to have. And so they were very helpful in helping people either fill out. We had not actually approved some of that, the legislation yet, so they were pre-filled out and then going to be given to the planning department. And the Montauk Chamber would like to have a list of all of those that are in the Montauk area, from the planning department, which Jeremy keeps a running list of what's going on. We had a brief discussion about the state right-of-way, and how to use the state right-of-way. There's no easy answer. Jeremy's looked into it, Fred Thiel. We've all talked to the DOT to see where they are, and there's just no complete answer yet. And so it is something, though, that they have discussed. There was another long discussion on having a central chamber of commerce for the whole town of East Hampton instead of separate chamber of commerces, which some are better equipped, particularly the Montauk Chamber, who was given a building to actually house the Montauk Chamber in, which makes it much easier for them to function. So that actually went on for quite some time, and I think that was probably one of our biggest discussions. Housing issues came up. We talked about the 0.5% transfer tax, and concern is always for employee housing and seasonal housing for the business committee. So the Wayne-Scott CAC met, and we were well aware that this was the funeral for Judge Walker on Saturday as well. So we wanted to make sure there were many, many members that wanted to attend that funeral service. So we wanted to make sure that our meeting fit in to being able to attend. Personally, I knew Judge Walker. I only knew him as Judge Walker. I don't think I ever called him Roger. Attended, many weddings for some local folks and local families here, or even seasonal folks used him too. I mean, there were people that grew up here that I knew that were here just as summer residents, and he always made the weddings feel like we were all part of it as we were sitting in the audience. So he was a force to be reckoned with, and we will miss him greatly. At the CAC, we talked about the police report on the weekend of July 4th. There were over 100 tickets that were written for various categories and various things. We also discussed the bike accidents. It was a very emotional response from the committee, particularly for the bike accident in Wayne-Scott. There was a suggestion that at the Highway 27, the state should consider, and we should probably push for a rumble strip that separates the bike shoulder area where the sharrows are for the bikes lane from the driving lanes. And it is costly. I know we talked to Fred Thiel about it years ago when we were putting the rumble strip down the middle of the highway, so people, don't get into the wrong lanes as they're driving. But this might be something it may be costly, but it would be worth it. So we would like to pursue that. We talked about the airport. The committee felt that the volume of operations is untenable. Flight patterns also seem to have changed some. There were lots of folks that observed that flying below 1,000 feet is the norm now and not the exception.
Is that for rotorcraft?
They didn't specify, but I'm assuming that was for rotorcraft. However, incoming flights over the ocean have increased dramatically, and they don't think any of them are using 3,500 feet as an approach. We did go over the complaint data that I had from Jim Brundage and the number of operations for the weekend, and also the complaint data was for up to this point. And it was noted that the complaints come from 20 different areas of the East End. And one member noted that, the disturbance isn't just to people who live near the airport. The quality of life is being affected by people from these 20 different plus areas over Long Island. Many people felt, and one person in particular strongly said, we the citizens of East Hampton are being held hostage by the lawsuits of the few and by the courts. There was also mention that the planes that have banners flying, that they go out over the ocean, but they come back over land, and that's not supposed to be happening. So they want to have, none of the banners at this point are coming out of East Hampton Airport. They come out of West Hampton Airport. We did discuss briefly South Fork Wind and the weekly status report and construction activity, which is all being kept at the railroad right-of-way. There seemed to be, the only complaint was that they would still like to see the road where they had done some repair work is still very rough. And if we can work through some of the easements to come back and have them do the work. I think South Fork Wind is very willing to do the work, but our easements say that they can't do any work during this time period. So they just want to, again, reiterate that they would like to see that solved. The other issue that came up was this southern pine beetle. It's been a very dry, low rainfall summer so far, and that they think it's a big fire hazard. Wainscott is being affected as other parts of the community are being affected by the southern pine beetle. Several members had quotes to take down some of their infected trees, and they're over $2,000 per tree to take them down. Is there any way, that the town can find a contractor that would give a bulk rate if a lot of neighbors got together and decided to have trees taken down? If they had a list of contractors also that the town might vet before they actually, find other folks. They'd rather have somebody that was vetted for them. And that is all that I have.
Thanks, Sylvia.
Yep.
Kate, do you have a...
Yes, before I start, I just want to comment on a couple of things. As far as quickly, Sylvia, on the part of Northwest Road that's bumpy, it's not just our easement, it's the state easement. But I'm going to be speaking with John Jilnicki about ways that maybe we can have that work done.
There was also mentioned the manhole covers on Beach Lane, the manhole area where they put in those manhole covers.
That's the first I'm hearing that one.
Yeah, that was the first I'd heard of it too. And I have not gone down there to look at that.
Okay, I'll be speaking on an update for that as well. Also, just something, David, that you mentioned, these e-scooters.
Yeah.
I just want to point out for folks that are using them or looking to purchase them. I went to the the Suffolk County Fire Chiefs Joint Association meeting, and also I have a family that's members of fire departments in the city, and there is a problem with the battery fires on those units. Not to be confused with electric vehicles, but the way that they get wet, the way that they're used when they're charging, there's been a number of fires, and they're hard to put out. They're extremely hot. So I want just folks to take a cautionary note on that. Both in the city, they have them in the apartments. They can't get them downstairs. They can't put the fires out. You can't use water on lithium. So folks should be a little concerned about, especially taking them trail riding and stuff. I don't even know if that's really an appropriate usage for them. So that's all I'm going to say.
That's probably one of the last conversations we had with Zach Cohen. was about, excuse me, now I'm going back to it, was about the upcoming version of e-bikes on trails. Are those motorized bikes on trails?
And are they really supposed to be used on those kinds of
that was
conditions?
one of the last things we were
Not
discussing.
thinking so.
Sorry.
So thank you. And I also then would like to thank you, David, and the Nature Preserve Committee for working with Pamela Bickett on the dedication of that park. That's very meaningful to everyone in Springs. And I thank you very much on that. Next week, I'll be submitting a resolution to create a litter committee from the members of that GAG group Against Garbage, that would like to expand their outreach on educating folks and organizing cleanups for litter. The folks in Springs will notice some surveying work being done near and around the Old Stone Highway Bridge that crosses the Pussy Pond Culvert. That is in regard to the repair of that bridge, and that's all that is. So don't be concerned about if you see surveyors out in that area. Last night, the Natural Resources Department and members of the Energy and Sustainability Committee held an EV forum at LTV and online. And I thank everyone that was involved. First, I want to do a shout out and a thanks to Jason and all the folks at LTV. I mean, it's just seamless now when they put on these joint events, the hospitality at LTV, the technical ability, it's really come such a long way. And I want to thank everybody that does such a good job there. The panelists were members of the community, the committee, and other folks who owned EVs. So they talked about, and it was really more than somebody coming in saying, here's the stats, here's the figures, what EV owners go through, dispelling a lot of the myths about charging, about longer trips, and what's it just like to own an EV, the positive, the negative. It's straightforward, and I encourage everyone to watch a replay of it. There will be a link on it at energizeeasthampton.org. And again, this idea of having folks who normally drive EVs every day is a really excellent idea, and I thank Sam Klein and Kim Shaw for putting this together. It was wonderful. Also, let me see, South Fork Wind, besides the usual compliance meetings that are still ongoing, even though they're not on our roads, the work is still being done on the railroad right-of-ways. I'm still attending those compliance meetings. There's a bi-weekly and a monthly one that go on. Also, I've been South Fork Wind has reached out and will be doing a meeting for discussing the upcoming planned outreach to the community as they return in the fall to the town roads to complete the construction. So we'll be having that meeting in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be taking a good hard look on their next step of outreach and construction protocols for the fall. Let's see, what else do I have here? I wanted to save this for the last. So Jeremy Samuelson spoke in depth of the latest Waterfront Advisory Committee and the grant application that came out. I'll skip that, only to thank Lisa LaCroix for presenting at that committee and really helping us understand the grant process and all that's included in that. She was excellent, and it was hard for the committee to end the meeting and let her go. Lastly, what I want to talk about is the Special Events Committee and what we're seeing happening in the Special Events Committee. And Kathy and I have spoken on this. And what we're seeing is a large increase in all applications, yes, but also in the number of applications for events on public beaches, whether it be weddings. We're seeing a large influx of events, clam bakes that folks are seeking special event permits for. And it's not just the amount, it's also that there are multiple applications on the same day at different beaches. But the larger difference that we're seeing, and what's of concern to the first responders who are on the committee, are the numbers of guests for these clam bakes. It's rising now to an average of 70, 75, some 90 plus for these events being held on our public beaches. Their footprints are growing. The activities are including now bonfires besides the clam bake itself. And the first responders on our committee have expressed concerns on being able to enforce the terms of the permit conditions, being able to see the definition of the footprints as they grow larger and larger. You can't tell going out there and trying to count 100 people in an area on a beach is really difficult, and also the amount of parking that are being taken up. So these events on our public beaches are growing, and I just want to bring it to the board's attention for discussion on taking a look before next season happens on how these events are held on our public beaches. And there are commercial events in many ways as well.
Right. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and there has been concern on the board over time about the commercialization of our beaches particularly. And so I would support a further discussion about that because, you know, it really gets to be too much of an impact at a certain point, and want to make sure that we're balancing that with the right and ability of anyone who wants to go down and enjoy the beach, particularly near the road ends where the parking is. Want the general public to be able to find parking spaces, and when you have a number of really large events every weekend, that, you know, gets to be too burdensome and impedes everybody else's enjoyment to use those areas. So it's something I think we need to have a discussion and further monitor.
Can I ask what time these events usually start? These clam bakes usually
6.
start? They start at 6.
Because the lifeguards are off duty at 5. By the time they break it all down, they start at 6. And, you know, a few years back, we met with the caterers and we put together a caterer short form for beaches. And one of the things that you have to attest to, it was no more than 50 people, and the footprint was, you know, no more than 1,000, square feet. But what's happening with a couple of the applications that we've received for 70 and 90, one of them, it was 1,800 square feet. I mean, that's a huge, footprint on our beach. And, it's, and a lot of the applications come in, I will say they're small numbers, 12, 15, 20 people, you're having your family or close friends down for a clam bake, but 70 people, 90 people, that's a real event. I mean, that's a commercial event. And so there's no prohibition in the town code for that, but we're feeling as a committee that it's too much.
My favorite time probably at the beach is right about that time.
Yeah, I mean, dusk doesn't happen until almost 9 o'clock.
People get off work and you walk down the beach. It's when them, so to confront 90 folks having a clam bake,
with where everybody can sit down, right? It's not like
and a bonfire.
It's not, or two, because of the size of the event. Because chairs. They've got tables, or sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's tables and chairs. Sometimes it's low tables and you're sitting on cushions, or you're sitting, on the sand. But seating for 90.
Yeah, even if you're bringing your own chair, it's still a very large footprint.
But the ones that were the applications we're looking at, it's all set up as, and it's just, we haven't approved them yet as the committee, because we're like, is this really what we want on our beaches? And that's why,
I think it just really takes away from, local folks or anybody that wants to walk down there and have a pleasant time during that, time of day. So, that's a tough one. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I think that, let me see if I left anything out here. Nope, that's it. That's what I have.
So on Friday, I met with the Army Corps of Engineers in New York State, DC, to discuss the Fire Island to Montauk Point reformulation study, which has now reached the 90% complete milestone on engineering plans. And they have released their list of properties in which easements need to be attained to be able to place the sand in front of various properties. Southampton has considerably more easements necessary than the town in order to move forward, which will take them some time. We only had 11 as identified by the Army Corps. However, staff had met with staff members and town staff with staff members at DEC, and in talking about the transition zone at the eastern terminus of the project, which currently is about where the Atlantic Terrace Motel is, just beyond that. There are 9 additional properties between there and Shadmore, which is where the steep bluffs, and hoodoos begin. And it was decided that we should ask the Corps to extend that transition zone all the way to the public property at Shadmore. That makes the most sense, rather than leave that gap between the very tall high bluffs and the rest of the project. The other reason for placing sand in that location is further east. And as we know, the general littoral drift in that area is from east to west. So it would likely stay in the system longer where it's needed than if it was placed further west. So we will be making a formal request to the Corps to consider that extension of the transition zone and to include those properties as well. And we did finally get from the Corps through the DEC, in addition to the list of those properties, the actual easement language that they will need. So we'll be able to start working on that. So, we hope to have our formal comments submitted, hopefully by the end of this week, making that request. And, we'll see what kind of a response we get in return. They did have some discussion about what the timeline might be. And at this point, given the number of properties in Southampton and other constraints, they suspected that they would have the plans ready to go out to bid by fall of 23, with a letting of the project by January of 24. We're not enthused about the timeline. We would obviously like to see that happen a lot sooner. That's 2 additional hurricane seasons. And when we signed on to the emergency stabilization project, they had said that FIMP will be coming right behind. Well, it's nearly a decade now. It'll be 9 years based on the timeline that they're talking about. So that's
Was there any discussion about separating East Hampton and Southampton?
Yeah, the problem with separating the East Hampton project is just not large enough to meet their cost benefit analysis, because it requires a hopper dredge, and to stage a dredge of that nature is expensive. And so therefore they want the dredge to be available for more than just the East Hampton project in Montauk. That's why we were tied with Southampton. There was some discussion about possibly tying us to another project further west, but at this point that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, we're going to continue lobbying for the extension of this project and moving the timeline up as soon as possible. I have a resolution on today for declaring AVIS Day. Amagansett Village Improvement Society is 100 years old, and that declaration would be for Saturday, July 16th, to be known as AVIS Day this year, in celebration of their anniversary. The Town Property Management Committee met, and we had a presentation from Drew Bennett as to his latest assessment of both the amount of work that would need to be done and the estimated costs of restoring the Brooks Park property. That report has been, hard copies and electronic copies have been sent to all of you. We're going to need you to take a look at that so we can further discuss steps to move forward. The Town Property Management Committee we'll also be taking some more time to go through that so they can make a recommendation. And we would also, after the board's had an opportunity to look at it, release copy to the community group that's interested in potentially taking over management operation of that property should it go forward. The quick takeaway is that the project would be quite expensive. Drew is going to go back and pull out what items are CPF allowable expenses and which are not. And it looks like the non-CPF amount is growing to a very large number, a number that I'm not sure the town or the private individuals group would be able to raise, but we'll have some further discussion about that and potential options as to what existing buildings might be restored and which may not. That would be part of the discussion as well. So overall, I think somewhat discouraging report given.
Has the possible management group been given this report as well?
They haven't yet. I wanted the board to see it first, and the property management committee will also have an opportunity to go through it. But I do want to get that to them. So, the sooner you have an opportunity to take a look, I thought it would be important that you be aware.
They can have it now, as far as I'm concerned.
Just wanted to make sure so that if you get calls or questions from the group, that you're well informed.
But the report doesn't split out what CPF can do.
It doesn't exactly. And so he's going to go back and put working with Scott, they're going to, Scott Wilson from Land Management, they're going to pull out those items which they deem to be non-allowable CPF expenditures, such as fire road, fire cistern, any kind of addition of climatization or sprinklers, etc. So parking lot, for instance, for public assembly in that distance off the road, you need a certain width fire road improved. Those expenses of the fire road and parking are over $500,000 estimated cost. That's a very large amount of money for a private organization that is not really even formed yet to put together. So the board will.
But do you have to have a parking lot? Don't you just have to have public ADA assembly parking?
You have to meet the, if it's public assembly, then yes, you would need parking lot.
I mean, but it doesn't have to be paid.
I'd like
wherever the occupancy is, you're going to need to have parking for it, just like we would at any other structure. So again, take some time to look through it, and we can reconvene and have discussion and probably a town board presentation at a coming work session.
Yeah.
We also discussed Carl Fisher House with Montauk Historical Society. There are a few more things that need to happen there. There's a management agreement draft, which needs to be presented at a work session. We'll try and get that on for July 19th for the board's comments, and then we could schedule for a public hearing. That would precede a formal license agreement with Montauk Historical to operate and manage the Carl Fisher House. There are a few things that we need to sort out in terms of like the allowable occupancy and use of various structures there. The Historical Society's really considering the garage / guest house or whatever as more office and not open necessarily to the public for historical purposes. The main house they would like to use as a museum. There was a brief discussion about the Gardner Mill Cottage and management there. The Farm Museum. Questions about the management plan status. That was one of the first, I think, license agreements we had for, if not the first, for CPF property by an outside organization. And I'm not sure the town ever really put together a management plan for that property ahead of the license agreement. So we're going to revisit that. So you'll probably see a draft of that. I think it was in final form, but I'm not sure it ever got presented at a work session for adoption, for hearing and adoption. Excuse me. Boys and Girls Harbor, the committee recommended the size of a 30 by 40 pavilion, which has changed over time. And they felt, you may recall, there was a period of time when we had cones out here on the lawn.
Yeah.
Basically outlining what the various possible sizes of the pavilion were. And the committees agreed that the 30 by 40 is most appropriate scale for that property and would meet the needs, projected needs for the community. There's also, I know David worked very hard to put together that multi-use rec path at Buckskill, which is being dedicated to Zachary Cohen on Monday, this coming Monday. And there are a number of trails there that have long been talked about being the next step. So that's in the process of figuring out what the costs would be for those multi-use trails. The topography is fairly level and flat there, so it lends itself very, very much for that. And as well as the fact that there's already clearing and roadway, like dirt roadways that the trails can inhabit without any additional, very little, if any, additional clearing. And another great opportunity for people with strollers or ADA access to get out in a natural setting. Children learning to ride bicycles, you don't have to worry about them being out in the street. So a lot of interest in that. There was a further discussion about parking at Duck Creek, and there are some various options that I think the Duck Creek ACDC, Arts at Duck Creek organization will be exploring with our planning department to see what kind of options that there are for developing additional parking on site to alleviate concerns about parking along the street there. To date, we really haven't received any complaints that I'm aware of about parking on the street, but we also know that the popularity of some of their exhibits and openings has gotten to the point
the music, the concerts,
where they could, we don't want them to be a victim of their own success. So they're trying to get out ahead of that. And so we may be presenting some options on parking. There's discussion about Springs Library, ADA compliant work that's proposed. That work's not yet begun due to supply chain issues. Not all the materials ordered have been secured yet, and the contractor wants to wait until all the materials are delivered and on site so that they don't have ongoing disruption for a longer period of time of construction. So at this point, they also, I guess, we're having trouble locating a 12 light door that the ARB had required, so that may actually have to be custom made. So it's likely that work won't actually begin construction until early fall.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, we're Buildings and Grounds is looking into the upgrade of the HVAC system there also, and so that's good. That's moving forward too.
So when we hired Drew Bennett originally to do the engineering on that project, we talked about finding additional parking, because now that we've got, the fencing, and the rain gardens in, I mean, parking is really tight up there. And I don't know if that ever got followed through on.
I'm not aware of any further development of potential parking, but I know that behind the library, there's additional space, which potentially had been talked about in our committee, at least, as a location for some potential parking.
That needs to be pursued.
There is additional parking that's planned for Parsons blacksmith shop to meet ADA. So there'll be an improved area there for ADA parking. But to your point, Kathy, there's certainly quite a need in that location. It's a very popular area. and with the various events, Ashwell Hall or library,
Yeah,
fish
yeah, obviously,
fry or whatever it is,
yeah, and with the farmers
Farmers
markets, and
market.
now we've got the Parsons Blacksmith Shop open once a month. It's
Right.
gets a little intense up
Yeah,
there.
exactly. So Fort Pond House, there was discussion about the deer versus landscaping. And, there's quite a healthy deer population on that property. It's about 4.5 acres, and a lot of deer are bedding down in that wooded section, and then obviously emanating out from there to neighboring properties. But there are a number of plantings of trees and shrubs and bushes and whatnot there that are not as deer resistant as I think we would have thought.
Or once were. That list of deer resistant,
Yeah,
is
it
getting
just depends on how hungry they are and what else there is around for them to eat. I think it's like the preferred dining list.
Right.
And if there's something nicer on the menu, they'll go for that. But, when it comes down to it, they're going to grab a burger and go when there's nothing else available. So there was discussion about how to protect the existing landscaping that's been planted and how to maybe consider future plantings that might be more resistant. You can't plant any kind of a sapling tree without protecting it during the rut. So when the antlers are in velvet now, but when they start losing their velvet, they're going to want to rub on a tree, strengthening their neck muscles and polishing their antlers, and they end up girdling young saplings and destroying them. They'll kill them with that activity. Second house, there was discussion. David, you probably have more information on this, but I believe the phase 3 bids are ready to go out, or
No, we're not necessarily there yet. We're actually just trying to procure the plumbing and electrical supplies right now, which is very difficult to do. And phase 3 bids, we're gonna have to go over the funding lines on that and make sure there's enough funded for it based on the anticipated increase in costs right now. So that's what I have on that.
So that's the next step, though, is phase 3, which is the interior of.
It's like 2.5 to 3. Yeah, exactly.
2.5 to 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're getting into.
All right. Last night we had the Amagansett CAC meeting, and that was held at Amagansett School. And I was reminded while I was in the school, because we met in the library, that Amagansett stands for Place of Good Water.
District.
So, which they have in a little seal with Native American drinking from, I guess, Indian wells. So, Place of Good Water. But there was a discussion about and accepting a code of conduct due to the events at a previous meeting. There was a decision that they needed to have a little further emphasis on decorum and process, and got a little bit spirited, I think is the way it was characterized in the minutes, with people who wish to present an issue, talked on and did not stop talking when after the chair had asked them to curtail their comments. And then there were others who were interrupting from the audience. So anyway, I think after that meeting, there was a general consensus that a little more emphasis had to be placed on the conduct of meetings. So those in attendance last night were very much supportive of that, and the meeting ran very smoothly. Some of the others who were more disruptive were not there. The CACs were wondering if they can advocate for community housing plan for the referendum, and I honestly didn't have a firm answer, and I guess I would defer to John as to whether or not CACs could actually advocate for the adoption of the housing plan and the housing vote for the referendum. I know they're supposed to be advisory to us. Can they even advise us that that should be adopted? Or
I don't think you could do through an agent what you can't do as a board, so I would say no.
yeah, that was my thought, but I wanted to just check because I didn't know the answer for certain. There was a lot of discussion about Airbnbs and the impact on the community of short-term rentals, and what further can be done by the town. And I reminded those in attendance about the recent case where we, through subpoenas of Airbnb records, were able to charge a Montauk property owner with 57 counts of violations, which can result in maximum amount of fines of over $200,000. This should be, excuse me, this should be a warning to anyone who's conducting multiple short-term rentals in the community, that there are very high penalties for the offenses. And currently under town law, you're only allowed to have 2 short-term rentals less than 2 weeks in a 6-month period. So if you're renting every weekend, that's not allowed. And we will be seeking to prosecute those who violate short-term rentals and high turnover, diminished quality of neighborhoods, quality of life, and also are really a reason why we have less seasonal and year-round housing for residents. These are being turned into basically mini hotels in some cases. You will also be liable for paying hotel tax when you're caught, which can be a significant amount of money as well. There was a request for more enforcement of the no parking on the lanes in Amagansett south of 27, particularly those areas that are marked no parking. Seem to be a lot of violations and not as much enforcement as residents would like. There was also discussion about adding a crosswalk at between Jackson and Stephen Talk House. So a lot of people cross the road there, but there's not a formal crosswalk at that end of town. They felt that was something that we should look into. It's obviously Stephen Talk House. Did I say Stephen Hands?
Yeah,
Stephen Talk House and Jack's Coffee Shop on the other side in that general area. A lot of people cross the roadway there, and there's not a crosswalk, and the speeds entering are a little bit higher at that end too. Let's see. There was question about what those mystery poles are that are popping up around town.
Those are license plate readers. License plate readers put in by the county. The black ones.
It's like a long pole. Looks like it has a camera on the top of it with a cylinder at the bottom.
No, not those ones. Those are different ones. I don't know what they are.
And they're appearing at various locations. There's one at there's one by the airport sign. There's one at the airport. I saw another one somewhere in Amagansett, but I don't know what they are, and I guess we'll look into it and try to figure that out.
They might be the McLean traffic study.
It's possible. I don't think they're all just around the airport though, but that would be good to know. So we'll look into that and try and get an answer.
The other ones that are solar paneled are license plate readers that the county has erected on county roads.
And what do they do?
License plate readers.
For what purpose?
Enforcement.
Of speed of.
It can't be speed.
I would
so
reach
it
out
would
to the
be-
chief of
Yeah,
police for
that's what
further
I said.
information.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. And that's all I have for liaison report. Oh, I have 2 more things. I'm sorry. Just an update on our local COVID test numbers for the week of July 3rd through the 10th. We had 51 folks test at our local Stephen Hand's Path site, 9 positive at a rate of 17.65%. And, the numbers have really fluctuated up and down. We were in the, 1st of April, we were only at 2.3% positivity. And then we stayed at about 8% throughout the rest of April and into May. And mid-May it started spiking. By the end of May, Memorial Day, we were at 20%, 21% the following week through June 4th, 17%. We were down to 11%, 15%, and then 17%. So it's really been, going back up. And again, these numbers are just those who've come to our testing site.
Right.
The home
There
test.
is a lot of home testing, so we don't have those numbers, and so the rate might be much higher. We do have a limited number of test kits still here at Town Hall, which are free. We ask that you limit yourself to 2 test kits per person while supplies last. And Sylvia touched a bit on her report about the airport, but just in terms of total operations year to date through June 30th, wanted to get a sense of where we were compared to, previous years. There was a total of 7,774 operations year to date through June 30th this year. Last year, which was an anomaly, which is an extremely busy year, there were 12,002. 2020 was 6,946. That was the COVID year, so that was a little below normal. And you go back to 2019, there were 9,030. So we're running less than 2019, more than 2020, and less than 2021. And then for the July 4th, for 22, that weekend, Thursday through Monday, 859 operations. Last year, 763, 2020, 745, and 2019 for that weekend, which I guess because the weather was so nice, 1,014. So, we're still seeing quite a large, heavy volume of air traffic at the airport. And that's all I have. We have some resolutions to offer, Kathy.
Yeah, Resolution 2022-894. It's a payout upon resignation for Kyle Vorpal. Kyle resigned his full-time employment effective June 18th, and audited time records indicate he has accrued vacation and compensatory time. And so he will be paid out $5,165.68.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
Resolution 895 is a seasonal lifeguards appointment and promotion for Roach Kasine to advance Bay lifeguard of $16.75. And also for John Clark for lifeguard captain for $23.25, retroactive to June 24th, 2022 to September 17th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
896 is a hearing officer determination. Let it be resolved that the town board hereby accepts the determination and recommendation of the hearing officer dated June 9th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's carried.
897 is a Black Rock Canyons. This is the authorization, the acquisition and amendment management and stewardship plan for the property 21 and 35 Star Island Road, Montauk, tax map 300-12-1-8.12 and 300-6-4-20.2. And the authorization price was $4.5 million.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed. Carried.
Resolution 2022-898 is authorized naming and dedicate the multi-use path as the Lewis Zachary Cohen Memorial Multi-Use Path. If I can just read some things off here, if you don't mind. Whereas this preserve contains the first of its kind 0.6-mile multi-use path, and whereas the path can accommodate a multitude of uses, including walking, jogging, children cycling, rehabilitating persons, handicap accessibility, and it's primarily attributed to the hard work and dedication of Zachary Cohen. And whereas Zachary accomplished this and many other efforts by building teams and consensus and revealing truths despite consequences, and by lending his expertise and common sense. And whereas Zachary championed many initiatives, investigations, attended countless town meetings, and continued to show his commitment to our town throughout his life in East Hampton. Whereas Zachary served on the Nature Preserve Committee since 2002 and served as chairman from 2011 to 2020. Whereas Zachary's many good deeds and tireless efforts to improve our town has left an indelible legacy of service to the community. Resolved, the town board forever dedicates this multi-use path as the Lewis Zachary Cohen Memorial Multi-Use Path.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
And I have a resolution 2022-899. This is to increase the cap for Regano LLC. And pursuant to resolution 2022-477, Regano LLC was retained to provide legal services to the town for the fiscal year of 2022, whereas legal fees and expenses were authorized not to exceed $50,000. And whereas the town has now determined that an increase in the cap on expenditures is now needed as matters are still pending regarding the East Hampton Airport, so be it resolved that the legal fees shall be paid out of budget line, which is for the airport outside professional, in an amount not to exceed $110,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 2022-900 is payout upon retirement. Jameson Trombino. And that is the amount of $16,223.73 for vacation time, sick time in the amount of $57,698.90, personal time in the amount of $2,093.38, plus $5,170.66 in holiday pay, and $7,181.34 in shift differential, less prorated clothing at minus $438.46 for gross total of $87,929.54 payable to Jameson Trombino, excuse me.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 901 is memorializing resolution to support of AVIS Day. Whereas AVIS, the Immigrants at Village Improvement Society, first met in 1921 with the objective of improving the hamlet for the advancement and welfare and the best interests of village residents. AVS is celebrating 100 years of successful civic betterment and has requested July 16th to be declared AVIS Day. Therefore, be it resolved, the town board hereby declares July 16th AVIS Day in recognition of the continuous efforts of the Amagansett Village Improvement Society.
I will second that and also remind folks if they want to attend the fundraiser for AVIS Summer Splash is August 13th. So get your tickets.
At South Fork, right?
Yes, at South Park Country Club. Always fun.
And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed carried. 902 is to approve road maintenance, Neighborhood House Drive. Resolved, town board hereby authorized the highway department to perform necessary maintenance along Neighborhood House Drive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 903 is issue payment notice of claim, Jamie Shell. And let's see, that is in the amount of $7,325.44.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Resolution 904 is a budget modification payment of notice of claim. And that is to move from contingency in the amount of $7,326 to miscellaneous payments in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed carried. David, you have?
Yes, I'm so sorry, space for a moment. I have an additional resolution right now of 905. This is a separate donation of memorial plaque, a gift from the Nature Preserve and Spring Citizens Advisory Committee. This plaque will be placed in the memory of Zachary Cohen at the Buckskill Meadows Preserve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. Any other resolutions or matters to bring before the board? Entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion to go into exec session for contracts, personnel, CPF, and advice of counsel. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Just welcome the wounded warriors that are coming this Saturday too. They're
Oh, right.
riding from the Amagansett Firehouse to Sag Harbor and back.
Well, thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
We'll see them Saturday morning.
Yes.
And so we can
It's 1:40.
reconvene at 2:30. Does that work